Fundamentally, I believe America has a brilliant constitution. The founding fathers understood a radical concept at their time, that the principle of life, liberty, happiness, the pursuit of happiness and the right to property were the natural rights. Later on, the European Union, in their constitution, put those same natural rights in recognition, and also they have attached economic rights. This is something that the Americans seriously need to consider. Also, the Americans need to consider a vital problem within their society, and that is inter-community warfare, basically, between different minority groups. Now, extremes of politics within those groups, such as the black community, Latino community, calling for the Raza and all the rest of it, and also particularly the Saudi and Israeli lobby, which I'll get onto in a minute. What are you hoping to gain? Because it is the Anglo-Saxon Americans, the Italian Americans, the Irish Americans, and the German and Dutch Americans who have been the glue and the builders of America. Okay, they're what hold America together. Okay, but the election of Obama, who actually I supported because he was the best of a bad lot, and he's a very articulate person, begs a question, because Obama's parentage is not necessarily considered by some Americans to be born in America, which of course thus leaves the question open as to if the American Constitution is being considered not their highest law, but merely paper pulp, and not being abided to, then obviously it leaves the way open for Arnold Schwarzenegger to run for the presidency. Because the governor of California may be lampooned by political satirists. You know, we're all familiar with his yar sort of noise that he makes on these comedy shows. But let's take him as an example of the American dream, because he has actually achieved it. He came from Austria, having left the Austrian army and gained an economics and business diploma, then achieved success in weightlifting and went to America with merely a suitcase, and yet now he's the governor of California. He has adeptly moved from understanding of monetarism from Milton Friedman, who, I mean, you know, cult leaders can be economists too, is my criticism of Milton Friedman. But the monetarist argument in some ways is quite sound, although I'm a social democrat and I believe in the social market, which it produces to the point of maximum social benefit. If you want to find out what that is, look at a site called Tutor for You or Tutor to You. It's about economics, and it will help you understand that. Now, that means that in terms of the European economies, the social market adapts to whatever point produces the best outcomes without negative things such as pollution, unemployment, or social strife. America thus also needs to reattach itself to the concept of citizenship rather than specific minority rights for special rights, basically. The founding fathers believed that those rights were universal. Now, Arnold Schwarzenegger particularly has said many times that his job is not to be a public official. His job is a public servant. This is something that Americans really need to hear. That you are paying for a public service from your politicians, and you need to be involved in your democracy. You're far more involved than, say, British people are in their democracy. We're almost completely divorced from it. But in Europe, every bit of spending is audited and then voted on until it reaches the European Parliament. Even the European Civil Service gives interviews, okay, and is held to account. Now, the other reason I speak about, I put Ron Paul there and Denis Kicinich, is because as Arnold has moved towards the centre of politics, and thus he's putting forward some very good ideas with clean energy, which will break the backs of the Saudi and Bin Laden crime families and the Israeli lobby, because it will divorce the American petrodollar away from oil and back to production, just as the euro has done. And that's why I think the euro would be a good reserve currency, and thus help America actually by doing that. Ron Paul has been, and Denis Kicinich have been particularly critical of the Federal Reserve, and the link between the Federal Reserve and oil is a reason why America is actually funding its own destruction, because the oil companies are controlled in the Gulf by the Bin Laden and Saudi crime families, and they can switch the tap on and off just like that, and that really affects the US dollar. So the flooding of by the Federal Reserve's of the money supply increasing inflation, which caused this crisis, and that Europe is again paying for, okay, which we're not quite happy about, but we'll help you just like you helped us after 1945. It is a big problem because the Fed is linked to certain lobbies, particularly the Israeli lobby and the Arab Saudi lobby, in a community of interests. There are of course two opposing groups. I'm not saying that either controls the other. That the Fed group, and what of course is part of the American government, and is opposed to the Saudi and Bin Laden families, but crime families. But the problem is they have a community of interest against Europe, whereas I would like to see the Atlantic basically being considered like the Romans considered the Mediterranean as our sea. Both America and Europe come from a common European heritage. Now, why is General David Petreaus important and would be a good candidate for president? All of those three would be a good candidate for president, probably Ron Paul and Denis Kicinich, much less than Arnold Schwarzenegger, because of the media company that they keep, which we've discussed before. Ron Paul particularly has had some sort of, some negative media attention from these truthers and Thatcherites, who you should stay well away from. But General Petreaus has a very good understanding of European and British military doctrine, and I think the Americans would do well to adopt that, and he understands how to fight against terrorism, David Petreaus. Another good candidate would have been General Schwartzkopf, or Tommy Franks from the First Gulf War, but neither of them ran. All that Arnold Schwarzenegger needs to do to get a landslide victory in 2012, if he is allowed to run, is say this: I will kill Bin Laden. I will kill the Saudi and Bin Laden crime families. I will cut the link between the oil and the dollar, and I will get rid of the Saudi and Israeli business lobbies. I will also restore the US Constitution to being our highest law, and then I will serve that one term and resign. That will be, he would win a landslide with that, and I hope he does run. in 2012.